Welcome to my channel. Today, we are talking about provider state management in Flutter. Imagine you are building a medium-sized Flutter application. You have got a user profile widget nested deep inside a settings page, which is nested inside a drawer, which is inside your main scaffold. Suddenly, your leaf widget needs the user's login status from the top of the tree. The classic beginner mistake is prop drilling, where you pass the user object through 5 levels of constructors. None of those middle widgets actually care about the user data, they are just acting as glorified mailmen. And the moment you add a new field to your model, you have to modify 5 different constructors across 5 different files. It is an absolute maintenance disaster waiting to happen. To make matters worse, you decide to use setState at the root level to rebuild the app when the user logs out. But let us look at the visual representation of this execution. Flutter is forced to rebuild the entire widget tree from the root down. Your heavy dashboards, your complex list views, your network image caches, and your active animations, everything gets marked dirty and gets completely rebuilt, even though only the tiny profile card needed to change. The setState method is a heavy hammer, and at production scale, it ruins frame times. We need a way to surgically update only the widgets that depend on our state without rebuilding the world. Flutter actually has a built-in solution for this architectural problem called inherited widget. It sits high up in your tree, and any descendant widget can look up and grab a reference to it in constant O1 time using the build context. It is incredibly efficient because it leverages Flutter's element tree. But here is the catch. Writing a custom inherited widget requires a mountain of tedious boilerplate code. You have to override update should notify, manage state lifecycle manually, and handle notifier registrations yourself. It is incredibly powerful under the hood, but it is a massive chore to write and maintain every single time you add a new feature. This is where the provider package, created by Remy Rousselet, enters the picture. Provider is a highly optimized wrapper around inherited widget that makes state management elegant, readable, and declarative. Let us look at the basic setup using a change notifier. We wrap our entire material app widget inside a ChangeNotifierProvider. This class takes a create function that instantiates our state class, which we will call userModel. Now, our userModel class extends ChangeNotifier, giving it access to a critical built-in method called notifyListeners. This allows the class to emit updates whenever its internal data changes. Let us trace exactly how notifyListeners triggers UI updates under the hood. When a user taps the logout button, we call a method inside our user model that sets the isLoggedIn boolean to false and then immediately executes notifyListeners. Behind the scenes, Provider catches this signal. It immediately flags only the specific descendant widgets that are actively listening to this model as dirty in the element tree. Those specific widgets, and only those widgets, are scheduled for a rebuild in the next frame. The rest of your widget tree stays perfectly serene, untouched, and unrebuilt, preserving your 60 frames per second target. To consume this state in your user interface, you have 3 primary APIs. The first and most common is context.watch of T. By calling context.watch with our user model type inside your build method, you tell Flutter to establish a dependency on this model. Whenever notifyListeners is called, Flutter rebuilds this entire widget. This is incredibly convenient for simple widgets, but remember the main drawback. It will rebuild the entire widget containing this call, even the static parts. If you have an expensive UI layout within this build method, you are wasting precious CPU cycles on unnecessary redraws. If you want to optimize your rebuilds and prevent layout thrashing, you use the consumer widget instead. Consumer acts as a localized wrapper with a builder function that gives you the context, the model instance, and a pre-built child widget. This child parameter is your secret weapon for performance. If you have an expensive, static widget tree inside your consumer that does not depend on the state, you can define it once and pass it as a child. Provider will inject it without ever rebuilding it. This turns your state updates from global earthquakes into targeted, local adjustments that keep your app responsive. But what if your model has 50 properties and your widget only cares about one single Boolean? If you use context.watch, your widget rebuilds when any property changes. That is where selector comes in. Selector allows you to write a selector function that pulls out exactly one value, say just the user's username string. The widget will now only rebuild if that specific username string changes, completely ignoring changes to the email, age, or login status. This is the absolute peak of optimization in Flutter, allowing you to build complex, enterprise-grade applications with zero performance overhead. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe and follow.